Welcome to the channel, and thanks for joining me for another edition of the Crowdfunding Roundup. This is a Wednesday edition. The Wednesday videos concentrate purely on the launch games from the day before. We've got 10 different games to look at today. 7 of them are on Kickstarter, 3 are on Gamefound. As always, my videos are bookmarked, so if you scroll over the play bar, things are broken down by game, by campaign. That way you can go and find the specific content that you're looking for. In the video description, it also lists the timestamps, so you can see where everything is. And if there's a campaign that interests you, there are links in the description next to the timestamp. So if a particular campaign strikes your fancy, you can go down into the description, click on the link, and it will take you right to the campaign, whether it's on Gamefound or on Kickstarter. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing. That way you'll always get notices when I publish videos, which are 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. The Tuesday editions also feature back half, which are the games that I played in the last week. So usually that's physical games I've played for the first time, and I give them a preliminary score. In the Friday editions, I look forward to campaigns that are completing their funding in the next week, and I take a deeper look at some of those games, and those games are handpicked by me as the best of the bunch. Now, in terms of what don't I cover, because I don't cover every launch, I try to cover most things that launched, but for instance, I don't really cover voting games, you know, Cards Against Humanity clones. If something is really, really rough, so it looks kind of just rough, unprofessional, and doesn't meet a certain, basic minimum standard, I won't include those games. And in general, I won't include games that don't have a Board Game Geek entry. So if there's a campaign out there with no entry, then in order for me to include it, I look at things like, does it have a rule book? So I can take a look at the rule book. Does it credit the designer and the artist? Sometimes I'll include things without artists, but I definitely want a designer listed, and I like to have a video attached somewhere in the campaign. So if it has a Board Game Geek listing and it's not a voting game, chances are I'm going to cover it. But if it doesn't have a Board Game Geek listing, then I at least need a rule book and a credited designer, and I like to see a video. So within that context, I try to cover everything that has launched. So our first campaign for today is this game called Chemical Overload. They had a funding goal here of $20,000. They're currently at just over $8,000, which means, I say this a lot, but usually the kind of formula is that a game has to do 2/3 of its funding goal in the first 48 hours, which means that this is probably not going to fund. But we'll take a quick look at it anyway. It's called Chemical Overload. It is a deck builder, and we can see that the campaign will end on April 27th. And this is by Rebirth Games, and it's the first game that they've published, first game that they've launched. Again, that's something that I usually say to people. If it's a first-time publisher, you have to be careful, right? Because they haven't produced a game before, they haven't delivered a Kickstarter before. In general, sometimes publishers will launch with people behind it who've done other things, but it's a new publishing entity at the very least, and so it probably means that this is a first time for them, and that means that there's generally more risk involved. Now, if we look down here, we see that the game will deliver in April 2024. And just out of curiosity's sake, since we are dealing with, I think, a first-time publisher, let's look over here. Here's the game on Board Game Geek. You can see they list it as a card game, fantasy-themed with deck building. There's not too much information there. And here's kind of a description of it. It's got tableau building in it as well. And if we want to take a quick look at the designers and artists, James Churchill, one of the artists, is a name that I know. So the designers, Michael Crandall, okay, first-time design. Katie Crandall, first-time design. Let's look at the other artist first. Maxim Kodarev, first time they have a published game. And the publisher, Rebirth Games, which is probably the husband and wife design team. Let's see. Rebirth Games is a North American design and publishing company founded by Michael Crandall and wife Katie Crandall in 2022. Yeah. So this is kind of a new venture for them. And I think James Churchill is the artist. He's the most senior person on this team. So he has worked on Feed the Kraken, Legacies, Vinyl, Dome Pierre, Public Market, Hogs of War, the miniatures game, Connecting Flights. So he's done some things, and he's the person on this project that's done the most stuff. So here's a quick look at the game, though. It is a deck builder and a tableau builder. It says on your turn you'll have a hand of cards. Any flask cards in your hand can be played to the table and remain there until used to brew a potion. There are also potions that can be played to the table for ongoing effects. As a bit of a twist on a classic deck building game, when a player gains new cards such as new chemicals or a newly brewed deck potion, those cards go right on top of their draw pile. So it doesn't go into the discard, as a lot of deck builders, where it then takes a while to cycle through to your draw pile. It goes right on top of your draw pile. Any flasks or table potions gained can be placed immediately in the player's tableau area. Players will be able to decide what unused cards in their hand they want to keep at the end of the round and which they want to discard, all with an eye on the cards they know they'll be drawing next turn. It's for 1 to 4 players, so it can be played solo, and it takes about an hour to play. They say 45 to 75 minutes, so 15 minutes less than an hour to 15 minutes more than an hour. And here's a quick look at the assets of this game. I would put this one kind of in the mid-range of games. Like it looks pretty good to me. It's got some time-proven mechanics like deck building and tableau building, and I like what I'm seeing from the art. The biggest worry with this game is that it's a first-time publisher and it's by first-time designers. Here's a look at the player boards. And I'm not going to spend too much time on these games. I'm going to try to cut down the time that I spend on these games to make these videos a little bit shorter. They do have card sleeves as an add-on here. There's some videos if you want to take a closer look at the gameplay. But let's look at the pledges. So there's a pledge here, Chemical Overlord. This is the retail edition, so this is kind of the base version of the game. It includes the solo mode. It's going to be $45, and in the US, you've got $17 in shipping, so we're looking at $62 for that. And then they've got a deluxe edition, which is going to add on some metal coins, gems. Probably in the base game, it's tokens, so you're going to actually get little physical gems. Player boards times 4. So nicer player boards than whatever they're including in the base game. A second difficulty for the solo mode potions. And that will be, let's see, again, it's probably a similar shipping cost, so let's say $93 for the deluxe edition. And then they've got this all-in, which is going to be $142. So that seems expensive to me for this kind of game. And this one has, let's see, they've got the player boards, the deluxe edition of the game. Okay, neoprene playmat, neoprene player mats. There's a Kickstarter exclusive potion deck, and they've got all the other stuff in the deluxe edition, plus sleeves, 600 sleeves for all the cards. I do think personally, I don't sleeve everything, but I do think that deck builders are good games to sleeve because you're cycling through those cards a lot. And if it's a game that you like and you want to replay, those cards in a deck builder can get a lot of wear. So those are your 3 pledge levels for this one. And as I said, that looks kind of like a mid-range game. It's not a super cheap game, but it's also not super expensive. We have a few of those coming later in this video. And the biggest pause for me in this one is just the first-time publisher status. And then again, take into account that where we are with funding and the funding goal, it's really tenuous whether or not it's going to actually fund. Now, if you pledge it and the game doesn't fund, they'll never take your money. It just, it won't fund, nothing will come out. So there's no real risk involved. If you do want to pledge it, if it doesn't fund, you just won't ever be charged. All right, let's move on to the next game in the list. It's kind of in a similar position here. It's called Crown of Ash, and I'd say that this is another kind of more of a mid-range game. Now, they have a funding goal of $12,000. They're at $25,000, so they've actually funded. They've already doubled their funding goal. So this one is happening for sure. It's a game for warring necromancers, 1 to 4 players, combining worker placement and area control. Again, 1 to 4 players, meaning you can play it solo. This campaign will end on April 20th. And the game will ship in March of 2024. Now, again, this is a first-time publisher, Card Noir, London-based publisher. So there is, as I said already, with Chemical Overload, there is more risk involved with a first-time publisher. Let's take a quick look at the designer, artist, and publisher over here on Board Game Geek. So Card Noir, this is their first game. I just wanted to make sure that they hadn't published other things before, maybe that didn't go through Kickstarter. Richard Lawton, first game. And the artists, Vadim Mishin, first published game, and Raphael Nobra. Okay, so it's a first for everybody. So again, that makes this a little bit of a higher risk as far as I'm concerned. Crown of Ash. And let's take a quick look at it over here. So a strategic worker placement and area control game. And what else do they list here? Fantasy, fighting, medieval, mythology, territory building with mechanisms including area majority influence, card play, conflict resolution, some kind of building, could be deck, could be bag, could be pool, turn order that is stat-based, and worker placement. All right. It says that it plays over 4 rounds. Players earn influence points based on the structures they control, and the player with the most influence at the end of the game takes control of the kingdom and rule for the rest of time. So let's take a quick look at what it looks like over here. It's definitely a different kind of cover, right? All this black and pink definitely stands out. And there's a look at your board. It's cards and tokens, which is good. I think for a first-time publisher, you don't really want to have a lot of miniatures in the game. That can make it really complicated and expensive to produce and create more problems. Okay. So light deck building, that's the sort of, we said it could be deck building, could be pool building, could be bag building. It is deck building combined with worker placement, area control, and resource management. All mechanisms that I really like, and mechanisms that you see in a lot of games. It's kind of tried and true gameplay here. So you're going to be using your workers to gather resources. You'll be drafting cards probably with those resources, building your structures, and battling for control of the board. I mean, it looks solid to me. That's what I'm saying, and it's got a solo mode. So again, it's another kind of mid-range thing, but with this high risk because it's a first-time publisher. All right, let's take a look at the pledge levels. So let me get the shipping up here at the same time. Who is the designer? Hello, I'm Richard, the designer of Crown of Ash and founder of Card Noir. So Card Noir is his company. Originally from Norwich, England, I've been inadvertently designing and house ruling games since I was a kid. All right, blah, 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 blah. Shipping, here we go. All right, so shipping is going to be $11 in the US, so we'll add that on to the various pledges. So there's a base pledge here, $56 with the shipping, $67. That's going to include the base game, some stretch goals, digital wallpaper. Then if you go up into the deluxe pledge, that's $74. Again, with the $11, $85, including shipping to the continental US. And this will also include screen printed bags, 4 of them, and 5 metal enamel round tracker tokens. And that's about it. So that's what you're getting for your extra, what is it? About $18 extra for the screen printed bags and the metal enamel round trackers. Let's just see if they're pictured here. Right. So here's your screen printed bags, and here are these metal round trackers. Also, 2 custom dice, resin dice, which I'm assuming are not in the other pledge, probably not. And then finally we go to the all-in pledge, which is going to add in this Rising Fighters module, which are all of these standees, right? Standees, and that's the Founders Pledge. This is more expensive. I wouldn't recommend doing this. There's only a very limited number of copies. This is generally for people who want to, give the designer or the publisher a little extra cash. Here is the all-in pledge. Includes those bags, the metal enamel round trackers, and this fighters module with 37 fighter standees. So it looks like from the deluxe pledge, which is $74, you're going to be increasing another $25 to get these standees. And with that $11 shipping fee, continental US, you're looking at $110 for this all-in pledge, which, that's a lot, in my opinion, for this kind of mid-range game. It may have tried and true mechanics, and I think people are getting more used to spending over $100 in games, but this is a game that I might want to spend $50 or $60 on, but $110 is what they're asking. And I think people are just trying to cover themselves in post-pandemic age with shipping prices that have kind of gotten out of control, so that if something happens again, they're not going bankrupt because of it. But a little high pledge, in my opinion, and a first-time publisher. So take all of that into account. Next on our list is D.E.I. Divide et Impera. And this is a game that I actually own. I backed the first time around, and I'll be playing this game next Saturday, which unfortunately is going to be after this campaign ends because it's a very short campaign. It's designed by Tommaso Battista, who's one of the co-designers of Barrage, and it's got a pretty good art team behind it, and it's a worker placement game. It's set in this sort of post-apocalyptic frozen tundra, and it is a competitive Euro. There's another game out there called Frostpunk, which is also set in a post-apocalyptic frozen tundra, but that is based on a video game, and it is a cooperative experience. You're sort of playing against the game and trying to build up this engine. So it is different from this one in that this is a competitive Euro. So I will be talking about this game after I play it, but unfortunately, because this is such a short campaign, I won't even be playing the game until after this campaign ends. I may try to do a solo play early next week, and if that happens, maybe I'll get a chance to talk about it before the campaign ends, but I'm just not sure if I'll have time to do that. And I would like to do that because I'd like to give you all some opinions before this funds. But essentially what this is a reprint of the game that was out before with an expansion that features a couple of factions. So there's not a ton of new content. There's just 2 more playable factions that I believe are referenced in the original game. They may even be enemies from the original game, may even be AI enemies, but now you're getting a chance to play them. So there isn't a huge amount of new content here. This isn't something where, they're just adding on tons of new content. And I think if you go and you were to look up this game on Board Game Geek, let's do that right now, you should have a pretty good idea about the game based on what you see from reviews and scores and things, because it hasn't changed that much. You can see over here that they have a rating of 7.8, which is pretty solid. 7.8 isn't, I prefer getting games that are 8s or 9s, but a high 7 is a pretty solid score, and I think if you like this type of game, this genre of game, that's a pretty safe score. And the weight here, 3.08, I basically say that anything over a 2.55 is a medium heavy game, and anything that's over a 3.33 is a heavy game. So this would be in that medium heavy range. And as we can see if we look down here, it's an economic game with farming, miniatures, science fiction themed, and the mechanics include area majority / influence, area movement, endgame bonuses, 3-dimensional movement, turn order stat based, variable player powers, variable setter up, and worker placement. And down here we can see it is post-apocalyptic. Now you'll notice it says 2 to 4 players, but there is a solo mode. So I think the solo mode is not necessarily included. You need to have that, but if you have that, you can play the game solo. And they describe this here as a game of exploration and survival set in the Earth devastated by a new ice age. The cities of the future from the crucible of civilization have become icy deserts dotted with the carcasses of skyscrapers now reduced to uninhabited rubble. Between alleys of old London, bands of survivors use their abilities to explore and plunder the scarce resources that are left to sell them to the pure caste in exchange for food and fuel. So the pure caste means that there is a kind of social class structure here. The only ones who still have high technology, the pure ones, are the elected heirs of the old civilization. Protected by fortified citadels, they manage the bands of survivors, helping them in their research or putting them in competition so that they cannot ally and threaten their domains. In DEI, each player will control one of the 4 bands of survivors, and they will be competing with each other for the wealthiest loot to trade with the pure caste. They will have to explore London on 2 levels between the streets and on the roofs of the old buildings to look for the precious resources of the past era coveted by the pure ones, technologies, and energy cells. Now, I did punch this game recently, and the tiles, there's these big tiles in the game, and they're on 3 levels. So there's this really cool way of putting them together where you peeled off these circular kind of gummy stickers. You'd put them on the boards, and then you'd put the next level on the board. So when you're done, you have these tiles that kind of have 3 levels to them. And it looked really good when I was done. I like the production value that I was seeing, and I'm really excited to get this game to the table. So let's take a look here. They have a funding goal of 40,000 euros. They're currently at 99,000 euros, so this is funded. And if we go over here, we see that this is the campaign will end on April 7th. So it is a very short campaign, about 10 days. Now, it will deliver in December 2023, and there are essentially 3 pledge levels. There is Faith and Anarchy. It says here, this new expansion lets you play 2 of DEI's most controversial factions, the Followers of the Cult of Chrono and the Untamed Breachers. So it is going to get you those 2 factions and then this boost pack. So that's all the new stuff. So if you own this, if you've owned this before, if you pledged this before, if you bought it at retail somewhere, this is basically your pledge, 49 euros plus shipping. And shipping, if we look down here, is going to be an additional 13 euros. So we're talking 62 euros, and that would be $67. Now, this one, nope. Let's go to the pledge. Okay, Leader, this gets you the base game, and then this is a stretch goal pack. So if you don't have the game, you don't necessarily want the new stuff, but you want to get the base version of the game and get your feet wet, this would be the way to go. So this is 139 euros plus 18, so that's 157. So that would cost you 170 US dollars. Now, and then the last pledge is the all-in. So that's going to be 29 euros. And 279 plus 29 is 308. So that would be $334. So that is the all-in. And that's going to come with a lot of stuff because the original campaign did have like 4 different expansions. So you'd have the core box, you'd have the stretch goal pack, that's those White Death. You'd have the 2 new factions, that expansion, Faith and Anarchy. You'd have, these are kind of additional characters, Penny Boom and Mad Max, the Candy Boost Pack, PVC resources, so this upgrades tokens from the original game into plastic. And then you'd have these 3 expansions from the first campaign, Old London, the Citadel, and Cash and Rad. And I'll let you look up those on your own if you're interested in what those do, but it adds on kind of new areas to the game, new mechanisms, just new gameplay. It really expands the game out. So I'll likely be taking a deeper look at this game in Friday's video because in those videos, the Friday edition, I look ahead to the cherry-picked games that are completing funding the following week, and this is going to be one of those games because they have such a short campaign. But here you can get a look at the board and these kind of 3 different levels of tiles. And the game does have miniatures, including some of these like ship miniatures. There's 4 of these vehicles, and then you've got little kind of plastic figures. And yeah, I'm really intrigued by this one. So let's take a quick look at the video for this before we move on to the next game.
Good morning, Scrappers. This is Tommy, and you're listening to Radio Old London. Today we open our broadcast with our column, Survival After the White Death Day. Choose your side carefully. Each faction has its own leader and special abilities. Enlist new scrappers to help your faction complete the missions the purebred hand out. Our buildings are buried deep in the snow, but the roofs are exposed and contain the most precious areas in the city. Climb to the tops, thanks to your companion skills, to conquer those useful outposts. There is strength in numbers. Never forget to be in the majority against your opponents. With this, you can succeed. The resources you collect are priceless to the greedy purebreds, but also know they will increase your faction's effectiveness, and without them, you can't hope to survive. Don't worry, markets are found in hidden corners throughout the city, offering everything you'll need. Make the most of the drones provided by the purebreds, and don't miss a chance to use their superior tech. Be assured, at the end of the day, you'll return to your refuge cold and exhausted, but you'll be satisfied with your results. Your faction depends on you. But be careful, don't become a creature of habit. That road leads to failure. Every workday should see a different area of the city. And our most important advice, join the legions of followers we've gathered here on Kickstarter. Together, we shall prevail.
Okay, now if I didn't mention it already, this is one of the 3 campaigns that's on Gamefound. So before we move on, one last thing. I already told you Tommaso Battista is the designer. This is his second big design. The first one was Barrage, and he was co-designer on that game. But the publisher, Ludus Magnus Studio, has also done Black Rose Wars, Dungeonology The Expedition, Scene Tempore, Nova Edis. Yeah, if you're just kind of curious who the publisher is and what they've done. All right, moving on, we've got the other big game of this period, which is from Chip Theory Games, who you may know from Too Many Bones, Burn Cycle, Cloudspire. Most recently, they ran a campaign for Hoplomachus, so they had a remastered version, as well as Victorum. And this is their new game, and it's the Elder Scrolls. Now, there was an Elder Scrolls game that kickstarted back in 2021. I say kickstarted, but I think it was on Gamefound as well. And that was by a publisher called Modifius Entertainment. So this one is by Chip Theory Games. So 2 different publishers, 2 totally different games. And if you know Chip Theory Games, you probably have a good idea of what to expect from this, which is lots of chunky dice, lots of chunky kind of poker type chips, and player pads with character upgrades and things. So we'll also take a look at the video for this one, but let's take a quick look down here so we can see some of the art. That is what it's going to look like on the table. So you've got these neoprene mats. That's another thing that Chip Theory Games does a lot, and all these chips, and your upgradable player mats, and your dice that's going to slot into your player mats. Free shipping with every pledge, which is pretty cool. The pledges for this are expensive, but as we go over those, know that those include shipping, and that is worldwide. Now, if you live somewhere, where they have customs taxes and VAT taxes, you still will have to pay those, but there won't be shipping. There won't be additional shipping. So here's what this is going to look like. There's some of their characters and their dice and the components. Of course, these plastic cases for all of the various chips and dice. And here's just a look at some of the art. There's a lot to scroll through, so I'm scrolling past a lot of it, just trying to give you a quick look. Anthony Letourneau, who is one of the artists that's worked on Too Many Bones and Cloudspire and pretty much all of their games, he is back on board for this, along with a couple of other artists. But if you like, the Too Many Bones art, you should like this as well, because he is involved. And I mean, I imagine the art that we're seeing looks somewhat similar. And as well as the neoprene mats and the poker chips and the dice. It's definitely what you'd expect from Chip Theory games. So there is campaign play, 30 unique mainline multi-step quests in the core box, and more to be unlocked in stretch goals. The game has 85 encounters, 50 bag-drawn and quest enemies, and 15 side quests. Different combinations of this enormous raft of content will be delivered to you each game, promising an ever-changing experience where no two adventures will be the same. So as you play through this, you'll get different encounters. Okay. And that's their big statement on shipping. But let's take a look at the pledges. Okay, so the first one, the base game pledge, it starts at $195. And as you can see, that's going to get you the base game plus a lot of stretch goals. A lot of stretch goals. So this is going to be massive just on its own. The gameplay bundle here is going to add on this Valenwood content. So it's a whole expansion, basically. And this will basically get you all of the content, this $230 bundle. Now, if you want to get in the all-in bundle, which is going to increase this $170 to $400, you're getting just quality of gameplay upgrades. You're getting premium health chips, a limited edition art book, these deluxe draw bags, a premium dice tray, and a premium battle mat. And if you want, these are also going to be listed as add-ons. So like here's the premium battle mat, which looks pretty nice. It's got this it looks almost like a faux leather backing. But you could go and just pick which of these things you like and add them on if you don't want to get all of them, right? So the deluxe draw bags here are $40. The dice tray is $18. The art book is $45. I mean, for me, I never really see a use for an art book. It's cool, but I'd like to get more games rather than put money towards art books and the premium health chips. And I don't know if you could reuse premium health chips from other games. They definitely have stickers that you're going to be putting on in this that will make them look a little bit different. But I think other than the stickers, I think it's the same health chip. Not 100%. My point anyway, though, is you could just get the middle pledge for $230, the bundle, and then add on specific items if you don't want everything that comes in this all-in. But at least in looking at these, that's already including shipping. So there's not additional shipping on top of that. Now, if we go over here, you'll notice that the designers here are Josh Carlson, Michael Gurnace, and Logan Giannini. Now, if you know Chip Theory games, you know Josh Carlson is pretty much the designer of everything. You also know that Anthony Letourneau is pretty much the artist of everything. So there are these other names, and I say, let's take a look at these. Also, we can see that this is a 1 to 4 player game, meaning there will be a solo mode, which I think is important for a game that's this kind of big and robust and has this much production value behind it, so you can get it played by yourself. You don't have to sit around and wait for the right group. Over here, they talk about it in terms of the category being adventure, dice exploration, and fantasy, and mechanisms including cooperative game, dice rolling, hexagon grid, modular board, scenario mission campaign game, tech trees, tech tracks, and variable setup. All right, so these other designers, Michael Gurnace, you can see if you look at this that his big thing is he's worked a lot in the Rune Wars miniatures game. So if this is something that you like, this should give you some confidence about this game. And Logan Giannini, who, as we see, has worked with Chip Theory quite a bit. He worked on the latest Hoplomachus games and also did work in some of the other, kind of not the main games, but other things. Like he worked on Unbreakable for Too Many Bones, and he's worked on Rage of Tyranny, some of the different characters and things like that. So he's been working with Chip Theory games in the past, but on some of their, kind of other things, expansions and stuff like that. And Federico Pompili is in the same position. He's an artist who's worked on some stuff, including both of the new Hoplomachus games, and also Too Many Bones Unbreakable, and some of this other Too Many Bones stuff. So it feels like the real big addition here is the Rune Wars miniatures designer. Now, let's take a look at this video as well, and then we'll move on to the next project. I think I did mention, if I didn't mention the funding already though, they had a funding goal of $75,000. They're at $2 million. So they're well funded. This is obviously happening, but it's Chip Theory Games. I mean, they make such good games, and people already know that, so a lot of people jump onto these. The campaign will end on the 21st of April, and it will be delivering in September 2024. All right, let's take a look at this video.
A darkness, deep as a starless night, spreads across the land. The chaos of the plain mound can be seen in every province. But that is not the darkness of which I speak. It seems you have uncovered the agenda I work to keep hidden, while Tamarill's finest minds were distracted by Manny Marco's machinations. Though you glimpsed a portion of my larger plan, what can you do? No one even knows your name. You're untested, unprepared. Your prowess in battle is still meager. What can you hope to accomplish? My followers are everywhere. Tamriel will soon be prepared for my vision, my future. But if you insist on challenging me, I'll gladly accept. However, a word of warning. It would take great cunning and training to defeat my forces. Your battles will be countless as the corruption runs deep. You want to save the realm? I will redeem it. You'll never get to me in time. But if you do, perhaps you will defeat me. The dark reign of mages unchecked. Maybe the world will know your name after all. But I don't think so. And sadly, your time is running out. Because my schemes and plots are always in motion. And even the stars cannot help you now.
Okay, so I should also say that I'm pretty sure I've heard that Chip Theory Games is done with Too Many Bones. You know, they did the Trove Chest, they put out their Splice and Dice, and I think they've announced, if I'm remembering correctly, that they've kind of finished with Too Many Bones. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if something like the Elder Scrolls, which has this huge IP behind it, becomes like their big game, their main game for several years to come, because this is something that it has that name brand IP, and they could keep putting out new stuff for it, you know, every year or two, and put out other games in between that. But this could be such a big seller for them. I mean, Too Many Bones is already a huge seller, but this has the extra incentive of having this huge IP brand name behind it. So that could drive sales for a long time. And it seems like the way that they've designed it, with having all of those, you know, quests that go into your adventure and the quests being randomized, it feels like there's more variability in this than there is even in Too Many Bones. And it could be really built upon in years to come to just have a huge variable experience with all of these additional expansions. And, you know, you're not going to get sort of a richer, better known IP. I mean, maybe if you do a Marvel game or something like that. But Elder Scrolls is really well known. It's really popular. There's a lot of money and commerce behind it already. So it would be smart of them, I think, to make this kind of like their big game that they keep going back to every once in a while. So this would be a chance to get it on the ground floor of that. Okay, so that is the Elder Scrolls. Next, we're going to go to a much smaller game, and this is something that I almost wouldn't include. I don't think this even has a listing here on Board Game Geek. So it does, Rainbow Hole. Okay. So that's probably why I did include it. But this one is designed by this guy named Adrian Bonet and his company Bonet Games. And as you can see, this is only the second project for him. The first one, I believe, was a failed campaign for this. So he hasn't actually produced other games before. Again, this is a first-time publisher. And this is just very simply a jigsaw puzzle made into a board game. And so you're trying to, each player has jigsaw pieces, and you're trying to kind of box in your opponent. So I believe the way it works is that if you have a piece that you want to play, you can't play it if it's, surrounded by other pieces that are already down. And obviously you could do anything with this. So he's got 3 different versions here. The first is this kind of the logo for the game that he's kind of designed. And then he's got 2 puzzles by different artists. So this one's called Catlantis by Jonathan Cantero, and then Food Fight by Evgeny Yakovlev. And that's it. But this is a formula he could go back to again and again and just make these kind of very simple, gameplay board games based on jigsaw puzzles. And the funding goal was very small, $600. They're at $850, so it's funded. The campaign will end on April 27th, and he plans on delivering this in November 2023. Now, if we're looking at pledge levels, we've got for $20, just this game, and then everything else is just for more copies. And there are only 3 different puzzles here, so I don't know if you'd want to get 5 copies, but in the future, maybe if you wanted different, pictures, you could. I'm not sure if I think there's a plan in general to have, more art on this, but I don't know if he has a plan right now to offer anything beyond those first 3. Now, here's one thing though. It says here as far as shipping goes that there's no estimates. It says shipping will be charged after the campaign ends. That, to me, is a red flag. I don't really like to pledge things that don't at least have an estimate of shipping. I understand that it's hard to predict things, but I think as far as it goes to put your backers at ease, you have to at least give an estimate, even if you end up varying from that somewhat. So I don't love that, and also he's basically a first-time publisher. And then, it's just a jigsaw, right? As far as your gameplay goes, it's not that involved, but I do like jigsaw puzzles. Yep. So that is Jigsuw. Moving on from that, we've got this campaign for the Last Kingdom board game. Now, this is based on the Netflix show, and it's designed by John D. Clare, who gamers probably know from Mystic Vale, Dead Reckoning, Edge of Darkness, Cubitos. Those are all games that he's designed, and he's working with Gamelin Games as a publisher, and they're responsible for the Tiny Epic games. So you've got, a popular IP, or at least a known IP coming from another form of media, but you've also got a pretty good designer behind it and a publisher that's done a lot of things. So it's not just, a licensed game that's trying to cash in on the name of the license. Now let's take a look at this. Actually, let's just put it in. Let's take a look at it on Board Game Geek first. Okay, and art is by Chad Hoverter. Since I didn't mention him, let's take a look at what he's done. He is best known for, he worked on Return to the Dark Tower, also Mice and Mystics, Spectre Ops, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Castle Panic, Cosmic Frog, Fate of the Elder Gods, Transmissions, Tail Feathers, Agamonia. So he's done quite a bit of stuff and worked on some pretty cool games. So you have a really solid team behind this game. It's not just a licensed game. They do list it over here as a medieval game with miniatures, movies, TV, radio theme, political, and a war game. And the mechanisms included are action drafting, area majority influence, area movement, campaign battle card driven, command cards, map reduction, market, and turn order pass order. And of course, Vikings. And up here they call it a game of war and politics for 2 to 5 players. It plays over the course of 2 rounds, during which players will perform actions to command armies to shape the course of the war. Your allegiance to the Saxons or the Danes can be firm or fickle, and your score will reflect not just your prowess in battle, but your political skill in maneuvering the competing forces of Britain. Each of the 10 leaders, so you've got different factions to choose from, offers unique benefits to your strategy and provides special cards to start your hand. All right. I mean, I'm liking this a lot, and I think, you know, after the those other 2 Gamefound campaigns for Elder Scrolls and D.E.I, this is probably the next game that I would be most interested in. So let's take a look. There we can see it on the table. It's kind of a dudes on a map game, right? Got your miniatures, various cards, all of these figures and army tokens, and then just a lot of art and miniatures and, you know, characters from the show. Okay. Some videos if you want to see more about how to play the game. Let's see, so there's a draft phase where you're going to be drafting cards, and then there's a conflict phase where you'll take your actions, including these 5 ones, taking a market action, playing a card, moving your leader, passing or preparing for invasion, and then in the conflict phase, you'll resolve the conflicts. And this is pretty standard stuff, I think, for like a dudes on a map game or dudes on a map / war game. And then there'll be a cleanup phase. Okay, and there's a lot of videos if you want to look at gameplay. There's a lot of, let's see, who do we have? Who has made videos? There's a Rado video, Tantrum House, Quackalope, Dice Tower, Man vs. Meeple, more Rado, Game Boy Geek, more Tantrum House. Okay, now I think there's only 1 pledge level. Yeah, $55, so that's it. There's nothing else. There's no confusing pledge levels. And sleeves just come with it. Sleeves are included, so that pledge will get you everything. Now, in the US, shipping is $15, so this will end up being a $70 pledge total, but it's all inclusive, and there are no more add-ons. I'm guessing probably that this is just going to go to retail like this, you know, with a Netflix show. And Gamelin is, you know, they've done a lot of stuff, and they're fairly... I think they have a retail mind behind them, so I wouldn't be surprised if this went to retail in this exact state, but probably without the card sleeves. So I'm guessing that is the bonus that backers will get. Let's see if they say that here. Every backer gets the high quality card sleeve pack from Gamelin Games free. Yeah, they don't say what is Kickstarter exclusive here. Game pieces. Of course, you know, they always show these, and they did in the other campaigns too. They always show these painted, but you're not getting painted pieces. You're just getting the unpainted versions, and it's up to you to make them look like the painted versions you're seeing. All right, let's look at this. Why back this game on Kickstarter? So the retail price is going to be $70. You're saving $15, but shipping is $15, so it's a wash. You're basically, you know, paying the same amount that you would be buying it at MSRP. The idea here is that you will be getting it before it arrives in stores, and you'll also be getting sleeves with that. So yeah, the free pack of premium sleeves, and be the first to play. So Kickstarter backers will receive the game prior to the game being available in stores. Now, that's been claimed a lot, and it sometimes ends up not being true, but I'm sure Gamelin Games will do their best to get it to backers before it ends up in stores. But just know that this is going to retail, the plan is going to retail, and there's a slight possibility, if things go awry, if worldwide shipping has problems, as it often does, there's a possibility it could end up in retail stores before you get your copy or around the same time. But they won't have sleeves, and you will help support this production and supported a new game by John D. Clare and Gamelin Games. Let's take a quick look at this video.
The Danes have invaded Britain, and nearly all the kingdoms have already yielded to the Viking Great Army. Under the command of King Alfred, the Kingdom of Wessex is standing alone, defiant against the Viking aggressors. Saxon and Dane armies openly battle for dominance. Danes have invaded the land and kingdoms have become divided. In a land torn by war, which side will you fight for? Dane or Saxon? Will you unite the land or betray your allies for power? Do you have what it takes to navigate this epic
Hopefully they're going to get to the actual game assets and not just show the stills from the show.
Destiny is all. The Last Kingdom board game is a game of political intrigue and tactical card play by John D. Clare for 2 to 5 players. Players will choose one of 10 asymmetrical leaders and use their unique abilities to swing control of the current conflict in their favor to score victory points. The game takes place over 2 rounds. Each round begins with a card draft, arming you with the military and political means necessary to successfully navigate the current unrest. In each round, players will attempt to score in 5 different conflict regions of the board: Northumbria, East Anglia, Mercia, Wales, and Wessex. As the game round advances into the conflict phase, you must carefully consider your options and the timing of your actions. While action cards are free to play, your choices are limited to the cards you've drafted. The conflict will continue with each player taking actions until all players have passed. Once all players have passed, the conflict will end and the region will be scored. At the end of each conflict, points are awarded to players on the winning side. However, no one on the losing side leaves empty-handed. While allegiance to the losing side does not result in any victory points being awarded, powerful action tokens are gained, representing a renewed resolve and more effective control over the action market. Players will also have access to the ever-changing market action track during each conflict. The action market holds powerful military possibilities at the expense of limited action tokens. Spend your tokens wisely as you elevate your allegiances, direct your armies, and acquire military sympathies. Additionally, players may have the opportunity to recruit powerful heroes based on the many great characters of the Netflix series to assist them in battle. Each leader has strengths and weaknesses that can turn the tide of the conflict, and deciding when to align with the Danes or Saxons will determine your fate. The Last Kingdom board game comes with 18 highly detailed leader and hero miniatures, 3 large detailed game tokens, and 65 army pawns. The Last Kingdom board game offers a game of political struggle, plots, schemes, and tactical planning. It is beautifully crafted to enrich the immersion and enhance gameplay. Detailed character figurines and vibrant colors are elegantly coupled with your favorite leaders straight from the Netflix series. Card visuals capture iconic moments to bring the full history to life on your gaming table. We know this game will hit your table often. Therefore, each backer of the Kickstarter will receive a sleeve pack for free to help preserve the cards for hours of gameplay. There's no better time than now to pledge your support and get a copy of the Last Kingdom board game and claim your free Gameland sleeve pack. Don't wait. Follow your destiny and become a backer today.
All right, so that is the Last Kingdom board game, and I can't remember if I did this at the top. Let's do it now. They have a 30,000 funding goal. They're at 40,000, so it's funded. Campaign will end on April the 14th, and the game will ship out in September 2023. So, about 6 months from now. All right, that is the Last Kingdom board game. From there, we go to Nuns with Nunchucks. A bit of a smaller operation. A battle card game where you try to take over the world with an army of hilarious. Card game, humor. That's all they've written. This one has a funding goal of $6,000. They're at $2,900. So this is tenuous as to whether it will fund or not. And if I had to take a guess, I'd say no. The campaign will end on April the 27th. It is by Rookie Mage Games, who have only done one campaign before. Let's see what that was. Okay, it's this Don't Get Stabbed the card game. And they are planning on delivering this in November of 2023. Now, there's a retailer pledge. This is limited to 100 copies. That because it's signed by the creator and illustrator, which means, other than that, you're looking at one copy or one pledge, which is this $20 pledge that will get you the game. And if we look for shipping, this might be another one that doesn't offer a shipping estimate. Let's see. No, they do. Okay, so $6. So you're looking at $26 for this game. So it's not a huge risk because, there's not a lot of money that you'd be pledging for this. And it's just a card battler with some really unique art, and hopefully it's fun. So you can have these battle cards, attack tokens, and that's it. Last player standing wins. Here's kind of a list of all of their crazy cards. Nuns with Nunchucks, Bigfoot with early onset male pattern balding, door salesman, the cryogenically frozen head of Jeff Bezos. Okay, you get the idea. And there are some gameplay videos if you want to check those out. So, I don't know whether it's going to be fun or not. It's going to be tight. Moving on from there, we've got another game on Kickstarter called Passengers. I believe this is another card-based game, but this one is sort of social deduction. A highly interactive game of tactical communication on the river banks of Limbo. So yeah, bluffing, deduction, negotiation. It says, on the riverbanks of Limbo, cloaked and masked individuals patiently wait for a sign from you. At a wave of your hand, you will place them in one of the boats that are bobbing on the oddly colored water below. So this one had a funding goal of $3,000. They're at $4,000. They're funded, and the campaign will end on April the 19th. And let's see, it's out of the Netherlands. Joost Das is the designer and artist as well. And they've had a bunch of campaigns, but a lot of them, didn't fund. They did fund this game called Ortis, and that was it. So this is sort of the second published game. And it's essentially a social deduction game. So you've got these, let's go down here. You can kind of see the art, right? I like the art. It's interesting. You've got demons, and you've got souls, and you're putting them, see there's the card art, there's this guy Yaster, he's a solo faction. He's sort of the wild card. But you're going to be placing, there's different components here, right? Vote tokens, mask tokens, wooden voices. I'm just trying to get down to the ships. Where are the ships? Here we go. So you're placing these various souls in ships, and then you vote for boats, and then basically you're going to be scoring based on what your team is, what you have, and who gets across. And I think players of social deduction games will recognize this kind of central gameplay mechanic, which is that some players are trying to get one group across and other players are trying to get other groups across. It's just that this is themed around, boats going to the underworld. Okay. All right. So we've got, let's see. The base game is $30, kind of a retail version, and then there's a deluxe version for $41. And the deluxe version is different because it includes screen-printed wooden voting tokens, 3 large wooden masks, and a metal coin. And let's see, I thought there was another campaign that didn't have shipping listed, so maybe it's this one. We are doing our very best to get the absolute best deals on shipping for you. We are still working on the deals, but we'll give you a clear overview as soon as we have it. And then in the pledges up here, it says VAT and shipping charged in Pledge Manager. So for me, that's always, I don't like to pledge games that don't have an estimate. You just don't know. I mean, they could come back and give you a ridiculous shipping quote after the fact, after you're already pledged in. I do like the art on this game. I'm not a huge fan of this kind of social deduction game, but this is a unique take on it, with the demons and the souls and going to the underworld and these kind of boats that you're going to be putting them on it. And we know that the 2 versions of the game are $30 plus shipping and $40 plus shipping. We just don't know what shipping will be. And I guess the other big question mark out there is because it's a publisher that's only put out one game before, there's not a lot of history there to look at. Moving on to The Thinning Veil. This was on Kickstarter before. It's come back. It's a relaunch. We can see that they have a funding goal of $150,000, and they're at $60,000, which means that this seems unlikely to pledge. And I'd be worried about this for a couple of reasons. First and foremost is that it's a huge miniatures game, and it's essentially by a first-time publisher, which is always just... I think the first time out, you want to produce a game and get it out there and kind of prove that you can do it. But going, to the mats the first time with a huge miniatures game, there's just so many things can go wrong. There's so much, I think, risk involved with someone that hasn't done it before. Even if you have done it before, there's a lot of things that you may end up having to deal with. So if you haven't done it before, it makes it very, very risky. This is a 1 to 4 player cooperative tabletop board game that encompasses RPG narrative storytelling inspired by Celtic mythology and Irish legend. So it reminds me of something like Tainted Grail or Etherfields, but with a Celtic theme behind it. And I like these kinds of games. I think they're very, very cool. But we're dealing with a first-time publisher here. And look at all these miniatures. The publisher behind Euthia went out and did a huge, big miniatures game the first time out, and they managed to deliver it. But then they came back because they made no profit the first time around. They also got stuck up in kind of COVID shipping, and they came back with a second campaign trying to make back some money, and it didn't work out, and they had to shutter the entire company. They were then helped out by another publisher, I think it was Steamforged Games, and now that game it's gone back to crowdfunding, and it's getting a second lease on life. But a lot had to happen for that, to end up in that positive situation. And they produced a game that I think was scoring in the 9s on Board Game Geek. But even then, it just had such enormous production value behind it and expense that they almost went under anyway, even with this game that was scoring in the 9s. So it's really risky. I will say, and you can see there's all these expansions and all these miniatures and things. They've just taken on a lot for themselves. And I think the game looks pretty cool. It's hard to say without much of a track record, though. We just don't know, which ups the risk even then. And if we let's take a look at the designer. I think we know the publisher hasn't done much. Paul Rose, first-time designer. I'm assuming UK-based developer of table miniature board games. Yeah, this is their first game they've published. Now, this artist, Maxim Costin, I'm not that familiar with. Looks like he worked on a game called Machina Arcana, which I have heard of, and did a little work for some small little add-on for Village Attacks. But the main person of this who's done a lot of work before is Henning Ludvigsen, who's, worked a lot in the industry. So he worked on Arkham Horror, the card game, Blood Rage, Star Wars Imperial Assault, Android Netrunner, Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures game, The Lord of the Rings, the card game, Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition, A Game of Thrones, the board game, Battle Lore 2nd Edition, Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game, the original Arkham Horror, Mansions of Madness, Black Rose Wars, Nexus Ops, Unfathomable, Project Elite, Bloodborne, the board game, Star Wars, the card game, The Lord of the Rings, the card game, Zombicide, Invader. There's a ton of stuff here. So he is just, an artist that has worked a lot. But he's probably a work for hire for this. So the designer is probably also, the publisher is probably the designer's company. So Henning Ludvigsen is probably a gun for hire. Now, they say here in the description, The Thinning Veil is a 1 to 4 player solo or cooperative board game of horror fantasy inspired by Celtic mythology and Irish legend. It can be played as a narrative-based progressive campaign across many scenarios or as one-shot games from the Game Night Scenarios book. This gives players the option of an adventure game format or a dungeon crawl experience. This roguelike system offers elements of puzzle solving, objective-based and narrative-based scenarios and compelling gameplay, exploring a world familiar yet fantastic. fantastical. I like all of this. I'm like super interested in this game. But the first time publisher thing and then the huge production element behind it worries me and gives me a lot of pause. Now, I will say that they've baked in, I think, a lot of this into the cost because this is not cheap. So $148 is the base pledge here. And that's going to include the core game, all the kind of stretch goals and unlocks, and then this Vision and Dancer expansion. And if we go to shipping, like they do include shipping, which I think, is awesome. That inspires confidence that they do have shipping listed. So in the mainland, though, you're looking at 27 euros, right? Which is $33, which means that this base pledge here is coming in at $181. And then if we go up to the Miss pledge, which is going to add in 3 more expansions, you're looking at United States mainland is 29, so 36. So the medium pledge here is actually going to be $127. And then this big pledge, 246 plus 41. You're looking at $289 for this. So it's not cheap. I mean, it's expensive. But I guess the idea or the hope here is that they've done their homework and they have, priced this at an amount that is accurate, and that with this pledge price, if they fund, they'll actually be able to produce this game, and they have kind of taken care of any problems that could arise with these expensive pledges. But because it's a first-time publisher, that means that if something were to go wrong, you could be out a lot of money. So it is worrisome on that level, and it would be maybe better for them if they put out a few games previously, and maybe the way to do that is to put out some cheaper games first, get those delivered, and then you can go out and put out the huge miniatures game. So I'm not sure what to recommend people on this one, but I would say if you do want to pledge it, maybe do the cheaper level, and then hopefully, if you do eat that risk, you're not eating as much, and if the game does well, maybe it'll come back again later and you can get everything that you missed the first time around. Now, here's the thing though, because this funding goal is $150,000 and they're at $62,000, this is likely to not fund. I would like to take a look at the video though, just because so much about it looks really cool. So let's do that, and then we will go on to the final campaign of the video, which will be back on Gamefound.
This fall, from Triskelion Games. The Thinning Veil. The veil between the land of the quick and the land of the dead is thinning. Evil spirits, restless dead, and unbound demons are passing through to the land of Innisfail, bent on the destruction of the world. Can you survive a reality with the veil torn asunder and stop the world from falling into an abyss of chaos? Discover who or what is desecrating ancient shrines to the old gods. Harness the wisdom of the Book of Revelations, where your choices allow you to control your own destiny. It's time to pick up the sword. The Thinning Veil is a multi-tiered progressive campaign experience encompassing hundreds of hours of gameplay for 1 to 4 players. With so many outcomes and choices, no 2 games or campaigns will be exactly alike, and The Thinning Veil also includes standalone game night scenarios for one-shot adventuring. Use our modular tile system to explore Innisfail, with over 40 different layouts included in the core game. The Thinning Veil also introduces the unique Triskelion Activation Cube system, which combines all player turns into the interactive hero phase, leaving no downtime. Discover rare items, upgrade your attributes, and expand your skill set as you customize your hero. Open treasure chests, avoid deadly traps, and combat the myriad threats from beyond the grave using our custom dice system. As you gather gold and resources, You can purchase better equipment, weapons, and armor. The Thinning Veil. A hero's journey begins.
Okay, so I like everything that they're doing. I really like it, and it's kind of sad that they're probably not going to fund, but they're not Chip Theory Games, right? I mean, they're not even Ludus Magnus Studio, and they don't have a track record behind them. And I think to produce a game, as they said in that video, that has hundreds of hours of gameplay and like 40 scenarios in the core box, they're putting a lot of risk onto the backers to get this produced on the level that it's going to take. And you know, I think it looks like a great game, and I want to play it, but I don't think I would back it, you know, and it doesn't look like... I think other people are maybe in my same boat, because it doesn't seem like they're going to get enough people to pledge this for it to fund. So I would hope that in the future, maybe they come back and do something smaller, maybe like a pared back version of this that they can produce more cheaply. And instead of having hundreds of hours of gameplay and 40 scenarios, you know, cut that by 75%, and just put out like a starter game, just to get it out there, just to get it made, and to show that they can do it. And then they could come back later and do this much bigger version of it. Because I think it just, as a publisher that hasn't done anything before, and obviously has a lot of ambition behind it, you know, with a lot of risk financially with all of this production, it's just... they're asking, I think, too much of the backers. But I like what I'm seeing, and I hope that they succeed somehow in the long run. I just think it may not be through this campaign. Okay, moving on to our last campaign of the video here of the week. This is called Tir na Nog Between Worlds by Grand Gamers Guild. And they do have a listing over here. Let's take a quick look at it. Actually, it doesn't have Between Worlds in the listing. Okay, let's just close out of these. Okay, so this is co-designed by Isaac Shalev and Jason Slingerland. It's being published by Grand Gamers Guild for 1 to 5 players. This is a much simpler game. The designers here have worked on Seikatsu, Retreat to Darkmoor, Ravenous River, nothing that I'm really that familiar with. Jason Slingerland, Unreal Estate, Into the Black Forest. Yeah, again, nothing I'm really that familiar with. It is a card game, fantasy, mythology with hand management and open drafting. And the publisher, Grand Gamers Guild. That I do know, because they did Endeavor Age of Sail. They put out the Artemis Project, Endangered, Gorinto. Gorinto is something that I pledged. So they have done some things. So it's a publisher that has been around the block before. And the campaign here has a funding goal of $18,000. They're at $17,000, so they haven't funded yet, but they will. They're almost there. The campaign is going to end on April the 13th. And let's see. This is going to ship in March of 2024. So it also looks like there's only one pledge for this, right? There's a retailer pledge. That's 4 retailers, though. It's like 6 copies. And then there's this deluxe edition. So if you're pledging the game, this is what you're getting, right? There's one pledge. It's $36. Shipping to the US here, $14. So we're looking at a $50 pledge in total. And here's the game. Let me just show it to you. So it is essentially a card drafting and tableau building game that uses this Irish theme. It says, in the Irish myth cycles, the land of Tir na Nog is the realm of the other world, the place where the fairies lived and heroes visited on quests. It was a place just outside the realm of man, off to the west, where there was no illness or death or time, but only happiness and beauty. The golden path to Tir na Nog is open once more, and the greatest Celtic storytellers have gathered for a once-in-a-lifetime journey. When they return, they'll bring with them tales of the creatures they met and the adventures they lived. Over time, those stories will become a saga, and the most epic saga will live on forever. Now, how this works is you are going to be assembling these cards and building them into a tableau to try to score in various ways. It reminds me a little bit of like what Sagrada does with dice, but this is with cards. Or it reminds me a little bit of something like Fantasy Realms, where you're curating a hand to score points. The difference is you're going to be building a tableau, and so you'll be scoring points in several different ways, based on the different, scoring point cards that you have over here to the left, right? So you're not just scoring one thing, you're scoring several things. And I think this is kind of tried and true gameplay. We've seen variations on this gameplay in other games, and it looks pretty good to me, pretty solid. And you've got some videos here you can check out. Yeah, but it's just the one pledge, and shipping's $50 with shipping, and it looks fairly solid to me. And the publisher has done some things before, so you're not pledging to some publisher that's never made a game before. That is the end of this video. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope I gave you some food for thought about what you might want to back. I will return with another video on Friday, and in that video I'll be looking at everything that launched on Wednesday and Thursday. Usually that's a smaller number of games, which means I put a back half on that video and I take a closer look at the campaigns that are going to be funding next week. So I'll handpick some campaigns, the ones that I think are the best of the best, and I'll do a bit of a deeper look into those games, and hopefully that's like your last chance to consider these things before they end their campaign. And maybe there'll be something in there that you wanted to back or you forgot about it, escaped your mind, and it'll be a little bit of an alarm bell for you to say, hey, if you want to back this campaign, this is your last chance. It's going to finish and end its campaign next week. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week, and until I see you next time, play lots of great games and take care.